Hi everybody, Dr. Carter here with my sleek new background. Yeah, you like that, don't you? I thought I would share a little bit of Emily Dickinson's poetry with you today. Remember, we were starting on this before we had to leave, so some of you may have gone over this individually or maybe in small groups, and some of you may have not, but I thought I would share some with you now anyway, since this is where we were. And we do need to get this done. It's somewhat fun, somewhat interesting, I think. So here we go. We're going to go ahead and dig into one of Emily Dickinson's most famous poems. The textbook on 426 calls it "Because I Could Not Stop for Death." Now, many of Emily Dickinson's poems are just numbered, all right? And so it's other people who have actually decided what they are called in terms of titles, sort of like with Shakespearean sonnets. But often they go with the first line of the poem, and that's what's happening here as well. So I'm going to read this. You can listen. You can always rewind and listen to it again if you need to. I'll offer some analysis and explication afterwards. Okay, so here we go. Because I could not stop for death. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality. We slowly drove, he knew no haste, and I had put away my labor and my leisure too, for his civility. We passed the school where children strove at recess in the ring. We passed the fields of gazing grain. We passed the setting sun. Or rather, he passed us. The dews drew quivering and chill, for only gossamer my gown, my tippet only tulle. We paused before a house that seemed a swelling of the ground. The roof was scarcely visible, the cornice and the ground. Since then, 'tis centuries, and yet feel shorter than the day I first surmised the horses' heads were towards eternity. So a lot of these sort of half rhymes, slant rhymes in here. Me, immortality, all right. Away in civility, meh. Okay. Day and eternity. So again, you can feel the sort of rhythm where there's supposed to be rhymes, but Emily Dickinson likes to go with those half rhymes, so sort of what we call slant rhymes, not a pure rhyme like boy and toy and dog and fog. All right, so speaking of fog, this is a poem about Emily sort of leaving the world and entering into the ethereal plane. So we'll just look at this based on stanzas, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stanzas, each 4 lines, for a total of 24 lines. The first one says, because I could not stop for death. I mean, how many of us do? I mean, if you think about it, how many of us get to actually die peaceful? I don't know, but I know a lot of us don't. A lot of us, we just keep going, and then death comes to us and takes us in an instant, okay? Whether we're in an accident or we get mowed down by another human being, or we have a heart attack. Some of us may get to slow down. Some of us, many of us do not. We just go, go, go until it's our time. And so she seems to be one of these people. I guess she's writing, or the speaker here is just wrapped up in her life. It says, I couldn't stop for death, but he kindly stopped for me. So death is sort of like a taxi driver. It says, hey, I'm here. It's like your Uber. I'm your Grim Reaper Uber. It's time to get in. All right. And so this notion of stopping as in stop living, stop being, okay, as a human with other humans, but also stopping as in picking you up. We've got that double wordplay there. Because I could not stop for death, okay, he kindly stopped for me. He came to pick me up. The carriage held but just ourselves. So this idea of her riding in a carriage with the sort of a Grim Reaper figure and immortality. Well, now she's gone. She's gone from Earth anyway. And she's in this sort of ethereal space, but she's dead, all right? And so she's got the rest of eternity to consider things, and she'll pick back up with that notion of time later on. She's going to play around with time before that, though. The next stanza, we slowly drove, he knew no haste, and why should he? Why should he be in a hurry, all right? They're no longer part of the earthly plane. and she had put away my labor and her leisure too, she says, for his civility. I guess she sort of feels like, wow, he's sort of taking his time. I should just sort of not think about my work or what I like to do in my spare time either, and just sort of take in this moment. What's interesting next is they pass things that Emily recognizes, like the school where children play at recess, past fields of gazing grain. It says they pass the setting sun. So here it's as if she and death are sort of moving along on the taxi ride or the carriage ride, and they are passing these things. But then she inverts that idea in the next. She says, or rather, he passed us. So it's almost as if they are not necessarily moving towards these things, but they are in sort of a weird time bubble, a stasis, as these other things pass them by. It's sort of like the idea of your life passing before your eyes when you die, right? And so we've got this strange inversion of the time dynamic. First, death stopping her, stopping, and what that means. Them seeming to move to different spaces and see different things from her life, or that she would know. But then on the other hand, them being in sort of a stasis and those things coming and passing them by. She goes on to talk about her clothing there. Gossamer, which is very thin, soft, filmy cloth. A tippet, which is a scarf-like garment worn over the shoulders and hanging down in front. And shul is a thin, fine netting used for scarves. And I think, well, we know that she sort of liked white, and that was sort of the intensity color for her, the color of passion and intensity. But now she's describing things that, like, you might wrap a body in, or that you might.
Ms. McLean, can you stop by Mr. Stanley's office before you leave? Ms. McLean, Mr. Stanley's office before you leave?
Or that you might think of, might make the material of maybe a nice final dress, but also it's very thin and wavy and wispy, translucent, like something a ghost might wear. So you wonder if she's really clothed at all, or if this is just the makeup of her spiritual form now. Then we get this idea of, again, moving forward. It says, we paused before the house that seemed the swelling of the ground. So stop, pause, them moving, them not moving. We paused before a house that seemed a swelling of the ground. This is probably her gravesite, okay? The roof was scarcely visible, the cornice in the ground. That could be the tombstone. It could be a sepulcher, or, sort of like a raised tomb, all right? And as she says, since then, it's been centuries, all right? So we started this feeling like we were with her in real time, okay? We didn't realize that this was a reflection until much later in the poem, towards the end of the poem. So once again, Emily has played fast and loose with this notion of time and space. And really, she's being like a time lord here. She's like a 19th century time lord with, and this is like her TARDIS that stopped for her because she couldn't stop for it. And the poem is really all sort of a strange, interesting, timey-wimey thing. All right, so you Whovians out there are, really enjoying this more than some of those of you who don't know the references. But anyway, she says it's been years since she had those moments, okay? That first moment. Yet it feels shorter than a day. So sort of a timelessness and eternity and infinity that seems to be encapsulated in a small moment. So sort of a paradoxical notion of the infinite and the finite all together in terms of how she, or the speaker, is viewing time now, and certainly how they view the experience of having first met the carriage and now having, quote unquote, lived in this new spiritual existence. So she says it's been a while since she first realized that when she got in the carriage and the horse moved on, the horse was moving towards eternity, that her life on earth was over. Interesting stuff, I think. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But that is Because I Could Not Stop for Death by Miss Emily Dickinson. Moving along, I heard a fly buzz when I died. Another interesting poem. We know from our work with John Green that Dickinson is interested in the symbolism of white and light and heat and white hot heat, or hot Emily Dickinson heat. And of course, with light comes sight. And so we're going to see that in yet another poem about death, or dealing with the condition of death, in which a speaker talks to us about, in reflection, about the moment of death, or the notion of dying, or what comes next. And so this one is, I heard a fly buzz when I died. I heard a fly buzz when I died. The stillness in the room was like the stillness in the air between the heaves of storm. The eyes around had wrung them dry, and breaths were gathering firm for that last onset, when the king be witnessed in the room. I willed my keepsakes, sign away what portion of me be assignable, and then it was there interposed a fly, with blue, uncertain stumbling buzz between the lights and me. And then the windows failed, and then I could not see to see. So if we take this on a very literal level, we've got someone on their deathbed, okay? And as this person is dying, they hear a fly buzz, okay? And everyone else is gathered around her or the speaker, and it's very still, it's very quiet. They know that she's taken her last breath. She's put her effects in order. She said her last will and testament, assigned parts of her away that she can assign, saying, hey, you get this, you get poems. Emily, give someone else the poems. We know what happened with that, right? So anyway, and she can hear a fly buzz, okay? So it's when everything is dead quiet. Maybe you're experiencing this at home right now. The house is just too quiet. You start to hear the buzz. You're like, what is that? Oh, it's the refrigerator. Or you hear a tick that you never really realized was there before. Oh, it's an old clock, okay? Or maybe you can actually finally hear, if you're an older fellow like me, that there's a buzzing in your ears that will never go away. And it's not external sound, it's internal sound. All right? So things are very still. They're very quiet. And so she can hear this fly buzz, okay? And she talks about the stillness in the air between the heaves of storm. There could be people crying, okay? Because it is sort of while it could be quiet and peaceful, it could also be sort of tumultuous emotionally. The eyes around had wrung them dry, so the storm has come. People have cried as much as they're going to cry. All right. The breaths were gathering firm for that last onset, the death rattle or the last breath, when the king be witnessed, probably an allusion to a god or a Jesus figure, or even maybe the Reaper. All right. That figure who is going to carry her on to the next space. I will my keepsakes signed away with portions of me be assignable. So basically her letting go, whether this is literally her signing on the dotted line or what have you, or some sort of more symbolic of her letting go, saying, I love you, I'll see you again. Thank you for being here. It's time for me to go. That's what she's saying she's doing in this second to last stanza. There's 4 stanzas here, each of 4 lines, so a total of 16 lines. But then there interposed a fly. So basically, interpose means get in the way. All right, so let's say that you can see my eyes, and I can see like a glow from the camera, and here comes the fly. All right, and it's going to interpose itself between my eye and the camera. All right, or it's, and now it's changing things. You see how it's messing up the camera, right? All right, so it gets in the way.
Miss Chan, if you're on campus, could you please call extension 1306? Miss Chan, if you're on campus, could you please call extension 1306? Thank you.
So there we go. The fly gets in the way. And then this last stanza with blue, uncertain, stumbling buzz between the light and me, the light of being able to have a soul in one's body, the light of living. All right. It cuts off the light. All right. And so that must be the moment of release, all right, when the soul leaves the body. So she says, and then the windows failed. The windows could be her eyes. Blink, blink, there I go. All right. And then I could not see to see. So that's the moment of darkness, okay? So this poem, similar to the previous one, deals with death and the moment of death. But again, how it deals with time, this one is much more immediate than because I could not stop for death. That speaker is reflecting with eons having passed, okay? We don't get the sense of that, and I heard a fly buzz when I died, that eons have passed here. It's almost as we're getting the immediate firsthand account of death, the moment of death. Now, time could have passed, all right? It just doesn't feel that way because there isn't that stanza that says it's been so long ago, okay? So it sort of feels more immediate. So we'll continue talking about Emily Dickinson's poems in other videos, but I'm happy to have shared a little bit on Because I Could Not Stop for Death and I Heard a Fly Buzz When I Died, which are pages 426 through 429 of the textbook we're using. But of course, these poems are public domain. You can find them easily. I'll probably also put a link to them somewhere in the video. All right, I'll talk to you more soon.